Who knows how many planes or warships traveled past this island, paying not much more than just a mere glance in its general direction? And who could blame them? There are thousands of islands that span the East Indies, many of them tiny and insignificant, and this was just one more small piece of overgrown land. Or was it? No, this was not an island. It was a ship that had been trapped behind enemy lines and was now disguised in foliage, trying to sneak through and escape the enemy-filled waters on a daring and dangerous adventure that would become one of the greatest acts of deception in the Second World War. But how does one even find themselves in a situation like this? Well, it begins with the Battle of the Java Sea, a World War II clash between the Imperial Japanese and the Allies, including the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and the Netherlands. The Netherlands are the ones we'll be focusing on today, for it was in their at the time territory, the Dutch East Indies, where this battle and our tale take place. The Battle of the Java Sea would be a disaster for the Allies, as would be the subsequent Battle of Sunda Strait. This left much of the Allied fleet destroyed or dispersed, and it was decided to fall back to the safety of Australia to regroup. With the Japanese now controlling the waters of the Dutch East Indies, or modern-day Indonesia, the Allied ships hastily fled to safer waters, but that was something easier said than done. For the Dutch minesweeper, the HNLMS Abraham Crijnssen, it would be quite the journey. Originally, she was meant to sail with 3 other ships. However, these ships were unfortunately destroyed, leaving the minesweeper to fend for herself and somehow make her way through the treacherous waters and into Allied territory. The Crijnssen was built for detecting and clearing naval mines within the water, not for combat or speed. If discovered by enemy plane or ship, it would almost certainly spell destruction or capture. While the lightly armed and relatively slow minesweeper didn't have much means to defend herself, she did at least have one thing going in her favor: the crew's ability to improvise. The small warship was just about the size of many of the tiny islands that spanned the sea, and knowing this, the crew would use a cunning bit of deception to traverse the unsafe waters. The ship traveled to a nearby island, and the crew of 45 began chopping down trees and vegetation. The trunks and leaves would be positioned to give the minesweeper a jungle canopy. Gathered foliage covered as much of the exposed metal surface area as possible, and what it could not would be painted with various shades of gray to give the illusion of rocks. For the average onlooker, the minesweeper resembled nothing more than another easily overlooked small island. The Crijnssen was now essentially camouflaged from the Japanese patrol that combed the area, but she still needed to be careful as to not draw attention to herself. For the ruse to work, this meant that the island could not be seen moving, so the journey would have to take place entirely at night, and the minesweeper would spend the daytime hours anchored next to an island to further blend in. For a week, the Crijnssen would slowly sail through hostile waters, with the Japanese being none the wiser, until finally, on the 8th night, the minesweeper reached Australia, being the last ship to escape the Java Sea and the only one of her class to survive. The Crijnssen's story would not end there, however. The ship would be recommissioned under the service of the Royal Australian Navy as an anti-submarine convoy escort, and later she was returned to the Royal Netherlands Navy to finish out the war. The ship was decommissioned in 1960, and today she has been preserved by the Dutch Navy Museum. Against all odds, the Dutch minesweeper had successfully navigated while behind enemy lines, the crew knowing that one misstep likely meant certain doom. However, with their ingenuity and will to survive, the Abraham Crijnssen pulled off one of the greatest deceptions of the Second World War.